We will. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Caregiving Cafe. We have the pleasure of having Garrick Colwell from Kitchen Table Conversations today. He will be talking to us about how do you choose and document your end-of-life wishes and much more, because he knows a lot about grief and how to cope with all these emotions that go along with that. And of course, we have learned that grief is not always experienced, or not only experienced, I should say, after end of life, but oftentimes in caregiving way before. So I will turn it over to Garrick, but I want to just say thank you to Jura Sims from True Heart Hospice, who makes it possible for Caregiving Cafe to meet on Zoom. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And Garrick, take it away. And thank you for coming to Caregiving Cafe today.
Thank you for having me, Lynn. It's good to see you all this morning. My name is Garrick Colwell. I am a end-of-life advanced care planning and grief educator. I come to this work having been a hospice volunteer since 1987. I've also volunteered as a hospital and hospice chaplain. And I also am a certified grief educator through David Kessler at grief.com. I hold a certificate in death and grief studies at the Center for Loss and Life Transition. I'm also a certified grief recovery specialist. And I also lost my wife 4.5 years ago. Her name is Kenslow. We were married on November 1st of 2014, and 22 days later, she received a diagnosis of metastatic melanoma with less than 6 months to live. So for the next 4 years, 3 months and 2 weeks, we journeyed together. She died in my arms on February 12th in 2019, sorry. So my loss history includes miscarriage, divorce, and I lost my dad just about 2.5 years ago as well. So I can, what I bring to the conversation is experiences in doing that. I also facilitate grief education webinars through AARP is the sponsor, and all that's listed on Kitchen Table Conversations, which is a nonprofit organization that my late wife and I created along with 20 other healthcare professionals in Austin for the purpose of doing this work. So it's kitchentableconversations.org. This year we'll do over 60 events, both webinars live and also in person. Our next one is coming up on Advanced Care Planning Made Easy, how to decide, discuss, and document your end-of-life wishes. So advanced care planning can be complex, but it's complex because there's lots of different aspects of it, and there's lots of different layers of how we do our planning. But it's important to engage in the conversation because it's better for us to know what it is that you want versus us trying to guess. And then of course, the death informs the grief. And so if we're guessing, there's a lot of guilt that oftentimes comes with that after a person has died, to say, well, gee, did I make the right decision on mom's behalf? So getting your advanced care plan together, your end-of-life plan together in advance is really important. And so I can speak to you today about anything that you have questions on when it comes to advanced care planning, end-of-life planning, or what happens after the death or after the loss, and how it is that you manage, how it is you navigate, really, not manage, but navigate the loss and the mourning that comes with a loss. Also, for those of you who are caregivers, oftentimes that grief starts, and what we call that grief at the time of diagnosis, and certainly it did with Kenslow and I, on November 22nd, 2014, we entered into the vast, deep, and dark world of anticipatory grief because we had just gotten married. We had to spend our honeymoon at MD Anderson. So bottom line is that we were in anticipatory grief in anticipation of what would eventually happen. And although it didn't happen in 6 months, which we're profoundly grateful for, but it did happen. And so the lead up to the loss is where we oftentimes start to come to terms with the fact that that loss is real. It's impending, and how we navigate anticipatory grief is another conversation as well. So that's part of the conversation perhaps today we'll have. So I'm open to answering any questions you have. I can give you some previews and some perspectives maybe I could start off with what the 3 Ds of advanced care planning are. The 3 Ds are decide, discuss, and document. And so deciding is, what do I need to decide as far as my advanced directives? Well, I need to kind of decide what it is that I want. What is it that makes the most sense for me? What is it that I would like to be? What do I like things to be at the end of my life? What would they like to be like? Well, I'd like to be at home. I'd like to, be in a room that has lots of light. I'd like to hear in the background my favorite music. I'd like to be able to have visitors come in and visit with me and my family, you see my friends and my family. So these are the kind of things, you start to think about, because these are the things that are important to you. Because this conversation really starts with what it is that we value the most. In other words, the question we want to answer is, what matters most to me? What matters most in my life? And that helps us understand how, helps us inform what the decisions might be. Some people say, would you rather be in the hospital? Or they maybe not want to be at home. More and more people want to be at home than ever before, actually. More people want to be at home now than at the beginning of the last century, early 1900s. So it's like, well, of course, that was part and parcel because the facilities weren't there. But now we've medicalized death to such an extent that we think we have to be in the hospital. And when in fact we can die at home. We can actually be cared for at home, and we can actually have the body at home for as long as we like. Although after about 8 hours, it's important to put the body on dry ice. So we have to decide some of these things. There's some after death decisions we need to make, we want to consider in our conversations with our loved ones and those that will be looking after things after we're gone. But we're fundamentally the first of the 3 Ds, decide, is deciding what it is that you want. The second one is also then deciding who it is that's going to speak for you if you're not able to speak for yourself. Speaking for you if you're not able to speak for yourself. That would be called a medical power of attorney. So it's either going to be that's a person you call a healthcare agent or a healthcare proxy. In some states, it's called one thing, others it's called another. In the state of Texas, it's called a healthcare agent. And this is the person who you've got confidence in, you've had conversations with, you've communicated clearly with, as to what you want done when it comes to your health. Such as, you may not want to be intubated. You may not want artificial nutrition or hydration at a time when you're not able to speak for yourself. You may be intubated, and if you're intubated, you can't talk. So you can write, perhaps, if you're cognitive, if you have decisional capacity, but if you can't speak and you're in and out of a coma, then you want someone to be able to speak for you on your behalf. So when the doctor says, we've got this treatment we'd like to suggest you for, then that person can speak as if you're speaking for yourself as to whether it is that you want to continue with that kind of treatment or not. So it's important for us to know that in that case, someone's going to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. And that person only speaks for you if you can't speak for yourself. So if you might come out of that coma and have, or have decisional capacity if you're out of the coma, then you, of course, are able to direct your own health care and direct the doctors as to what to do and not to do. You have the opportunity to refuse treatments of any kind. You have the opportunity to embrace treatment of any kind. So it's your choice. It's your body. It's your choice, period. No one can take that from you. As a matter of fact, it's backed up by a law that was put in place in 1991 called the Patient Self-Determination Act. Why we had to make it a law, I don't know why, but nonetheless, we did. And so you have self-determination, which you've always had in medical conditions. We've always believed that the doctors know best, and that's true to the extent that the doctors know what they know. At the same time, as Kinsella and I did, is that we created a team around her care, and we spent a great deal of time doing a lot of research and asking many, many, many questions. And so that's an important part of becoming educated in this process. We're not wired to believe that we're going to die. We're not wired to believe that we have an end. We're wired to believe there's hope. And I can tell you from personal experience, it was true. I mean, I could see Kinsella deteriorating, But at the same time, I hope that she would still be here. She would still continue to live on. But our mind, that's how we're wired. And it's been studies around that. And we're just not wired to think that there's going to be an end to us, because we're here to survive and to continue to move forward. So we've got it's kind of intuitive to even have this conversation to some extent, and to say, well, gee whiz, the reality of my mortality, well, gee whiz, the last time I checked the mortality rate in Travis County, it was still trending at 100%. That means, wow, none of us are getting out of here alive. So how do we have that conversation? That's where the discomfort is. And so it's slow. It's it's one of those conversations that keeps on giving as you dive into it. But you have to be willing to lean into and have the conversation, because it's inevitable. So even though we as a society, we're probably one of the first generations to believe that somehow we've gotten to believe that death might be an option. It's not. The truth is that we all die. So let's take the time to have the conversation at your own pace and in your own way. Dose yourself with the reality of it, but come to terms with it as best you can, so that you can leave an end of life plan for your loved ones and not burden them with having to make some of these decisions. So let's go back to the 3Ds. There's first D is deciding what it is that you want. What matters most to you is the way I would begin the conversation with myself. What matters most to me is with my wife Kenslow was what mattered to me was connection. She wanted to be connected. She wanted to have her family. So every morning when she woke up, she would give me her schedule, what she wanted, who she wanted to be there. And I would arrange the chairs at the foot of her bed, and she could raise her bed up and she could see everybody. And she would be these chairs were arranged in a half moon, and people would come and go as the day progressed, visiting and saying hello. And Kensel had this beautiful skill of being able to communicate and connect with people. You could be in a room of 100 people, and she was talking to you, and just the two of you were having this conversation, regardless of what was going on around. She's an amazing, amazing way of connecting with people. And so that's what she did. That's what she wanted. That's how she wanted. She also told us exactly how she wanted her celebration of life to be, who was going to officiate, who was going to say, who was going to speak, who was going to play the music, what kind of food. So you can get as many details in that as you like. You can also have things read for you at services and such. So that's how much detail you can get into. So the first of the 3Ds is, again, what it is that matters most to you. And the second is deciding who it is that's going to speak for you if you're not able to speak for yourself. And in that is called a medical power of attorney. And that's one of the critical documents that you want to have. Two important documents to have are your living will. Now, different than your last will and testament, very different. That has to do with your assets. But your living will, in the state of Texas, it's called a directive to physician and family or surrogates. Directive to physician and family or surrogates. And that document is where you actually put in section 2 on page 2, additional, I can't remember the name of it, but it's additional requests, is that you actually outline what it is that you want done physically, like hydration, nutrition, CPR. Maybe you want CPR, maybe you don't. And there's a whole process you have to go through if you're in the hospital to request CPR. And there's a whole nother document that you would actually have signed and executed in order to have what's called an out of hospital do not resuscitate order. So all those are parts and part of the conversation. So the first of the 3Ds, decide what it is you want, decide who's going to speak for you. The second of the 3Ds is discuss. There's two, that breaks down into two categories. One, how you discuss this with your family, and then two, how you discuss this with your healthcare professionals. So the idea is that making sure that your family knows what your wishes are, so there's no confusion, ambiguity, or reason for conflict within the family. Conflict in a family takes place because there's lack of communication. Now, you may have 3 or 4 children. I have 5 children, so I can't imagine all of them agreeing on anything. That's just their nature. So, but so let's say that you get to a place where they say, well, I don't agree. That's not what Dad said. Well, that's not what I want for Dad. And oftentimes it has to do with the person who's out of town, who, all of a sudden swoops in at the last minute and says, well, that's not what they want. When in fact, you've been on the scene and involved and engaged the entire time, and you know exactly what Mom wants. And so oftentimes it has to do with the person who's outside of that circle, that immediate circle of care, that comes in trying to deal with the grief and the loss, the pending loss in their own way. And they, wind up getting, they try to bully their way, or they try and be, authoritative and whatnot, when in fact, that's where the document that mom signed, her living will and her power of attorney, indicate that this is how mom wanted things to be. So we're going to, it doesn't have to be angry, doesn't have to be a big discussion. Just say, well, let's take a look at what mom wants. I understand that you want this and you feel this is the right thing to do, but this is what mom has actually documented, and this is what we're going to do, because this is what mom wants, because I know that's what we're all here for, is to make sure that mom gets what she wants. And so that is important to understand. And those conversations take place over the course of time. They're not a one and done conversation. The conversations take place over time, because it takes time for people to integrate, to acknowledge and to begin to integrate the reality of the mortality of their loved ones. I mean, when mothers oftentimes start talking about this with their children, say, "Oh, hell no, mom, you're not dying, you're not going anywhere. Don't want to talk about it. No, 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 stop." And so you've got to take it in a gentle way, because you got to meet them where they are. They're, obviously in a very tender place when it comes to the death of a parent, because it's primal. It's a primal loss. I mean, these are the people that knew you from the very beginning of your existence in this lifetime. Wow. So when that mirror is gone, it's just a whole fundamental primal experience of losing somebody so very close to you in many and varied ways. So having this conversation with your loved ones over the course of time, and be able to guide the conversation and meet them where they are. Most importantly is to meet them where they are as you bring them along, and understanding this is the reality and this is what you want. That takes time, and it's not a one and done conversation. So first and foremost is obviously deciding what it is that you want, creating the documents to support that, and then being able to share those documents with your loved ones at the appropriate time, in the appropriate way. And the second of who you want to discuss this with is your healthcare professionals. Two things with the healthcare professionals. One is that you want to make sure that they have copies of both your living will and your medical power of attorney. So what you do is you get these documents executed according to the law, and then you distribute with abandon. So you making sure everybody has copies, because copies are fine. If you have a situation health-wise that you may go to the hospital, it's important you pack a set of the documents in your go bag, along with your chargers and your glasses and all those types of things that you may need in the hospital. But obviously maybe put them in a red folder or red envelope or something that distinguishes them, so to make sure that you have them entered into the time you're admitted to the hospital. And take extra copies to have also in your bag for when you get on the floor. When you're admitted and you're placed on the floor, then it's important to make sure that your documents are scanned into Epic or whatever their EMR, their electronic medical record system is, so they understand what it is that you want, and you communicate that with your head nurse as well as who's on each shift. So everybody's understanding and everybody's on the same page. This is what we're trying to achieve. There's a tremendous amount of humanity involved in trying to make this all happen. And everybody has a different state of consciousness or awareness about this topic, and has their own beliefs, and is not necessarily shy about sharing them. However, it's your body, it's your choice. So it's up to you to communicate, or have your advocates communicate for you as to what you want. I mean, I also have served and continue to serve as patient advocate. So people will come and sit down with me and say, here's what's going on. Or they'll be in the hospital and they'll need someone to be able to ensure that they're getting the care that they have asked for, and not the care that they don't want, or medications that they don't want, even though they're part of protocols. As an example, my former mother-in-law was admitted after a fall to the hospital, and she came up onto the floor, and I was with her, and the nurse walked in and says, "We need to give her some Lovenox." And the question was, well, why? Well, that's just because the doctor ordered it. who's the doctor? Oh, he's the orthopedic. Well, why is Lovenox? Well, because it's part of the protocol for a fall, but that's not what the doctor hasn't examined her, nor is that something that she tolerates very well. And so therein lies the questions. So you've got to be on, be able to have someone there to communicate with you, for you. And so that knowledge by your loved ones and by your advocates and by your medical power of attorney is so important. And also keep in mind that when you go to the hospital, your primary care physician is not going to be tending to you. So those medical records might not necessarily be available immediately upon admission. So making sure you have your medical power of attorney as well as your living will, your directed to physician and family or surrogates, is something that you want to make sure you have copies and communicate with everybody that you touch base with. Prior to that, of course, you want to talk to your doctors, your medical team. You have a cardiologist, you have a rheumatologist, you have whatever your team is comprised of. They should all know what your preferences are when it comes to end of life as well, so they can treat in accordance with and in alignment with what matters most to you. Is this all making sense? I'm giving you a bunch of information at one time, so let me know if
there. May I interject for a second regarding the documents, because it can be a lot of papers, and copies are great. There's a Waywiser app that will securely store all of these documents in one app. They even gave me a cup, okay? Waywiser.com. And they will actually be here later on this year. They have a new project where they store all of these very important documents, and you have them right then and there with you, and you can show them to whomever needs to see, just in case, you haven't, like, your printer is out of ink, and you haven't printed those things like some of us at this table, but you can have them there. So anyway, it's just another easy way to carry those documents. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think, Sonia, did you say there's a national website?
I have to check with my,
for
I'm pretty sure,
documents?
I'm pretty sure when I had my first will drawn up that I have to go back and look, but there was a website where you could actually scan in and register your documents, and it's a national website so that any hospital can go in, I think, using your social security number and view your documents.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll look into that. Thank you.
I'll check into it.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can go to kitchentableconversations.org and go to resources, and you can find there's a list of services that are both free and paid for, like Waywiser.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You can also put, like, mydirectives.com out of Dallas. They have a free service. And so you can actually put an icon on your Apple phone. And when you touch the icon, it opens up into a video of you giving instructions.
Fantastic.
And also accesses. You can, access, like, I use mydirectives.com, and, all my medical power of attorney and my executors all have access to those documents. And so you can bring them up, and you can actually just scan them in and put them as a PDF on your phone, and you distribute it from your phone. Fantastic. So there's just many different ways to electronically and to physically store it. There's important or a company called Knockbox, Nokbox, and that helps. They help a very simply wonderful company. They help you organize everything. There's another company called empathy.com. It helps you with what to do after the death of someone, help you navigate the legalities and the challenges that go along with that. So
I have a quick question on my husband and I did do a will with the medical power of attorney and everything, but I don't really remember doing anything very detailed on a living will. Where is that to download and fill out, or how does that work? Is it a document, or?
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. When we did ours, we just did, there's like 5 documents, legal documents, that every family caregivers should have, apparently. And that's among them, but yeah, so Garrick will send them. Do you want to send them to Caregiving Cafe, or are you going to put a link on the chat,
I'll give
Garrick?
you the link now. And this will give you a link to advanced directives. There's, a number of them here. Declaration of mental health treatment, directed to physician and family or surrogates. That is the living will. Medical power of attorney. That is, where you assign someone or ask someone to be able to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Out of hospital, do not resuscitate order. This is a very specific form that you have to fill out and execute in a very specific way in order for you to be at what's called out of hospital DNR. And then you have a statutory durable power of attorney. There's also durable power of attorney gets a chance for that person to be able to write checks on your behalf, certain actions regarding your property. You also help someone make some medical and other healthcare decisions for you. But really, you're looking for the medical power of attorney to do that specifically. But your durable power of attorney is really more someone who take care of your finances when you're not able to do that. And so I'm going to give you this link in the chat right now, and you can make it live, and you could forward it from there if you like.
Thank you. That's nice to have everything in one place, because that
Yeah.
medical power of attorney is hard to find.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Here we go. Okay. There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you. And
That's for that's all the directives that the state of Texas offers. Now, it doesn't include all the paperwork, the after death care decisions that need to be made, like disposition of your body or authorization for who's going to take care of your body after you're gone. So the idea is that there's more forms than 5. So I'm just saying.
thank you
There's
so much.
There's organ and tissue donation. There's just tons of it. So
This
you can copy this, Lynn. Just click on it. It'll open up into a browser on your computer, and you
Yeah.
can just cut and paste that into
Yeah, thank you. I did that. And then the Zoom disappeared and I got it back. So I hope you're very impressed. And now we're taking pictures of the link. Okay.
we were
Thank you
trying to
so
get
much.
Okay.
trying to get that medical
So
appointment
that's
for my son. Just he's young and healthy,
Yeah.
but my husband had a bad fall, and we went through a whole lot of where he couldn't make any decisions for a while, and I just thought, so I wanted my son to have one, just in that case.
Yeah.
So, but I had a hard time finding it. So
There
Yeah.
you are.
thank
You
you.
see, I
and
told you.
the thing is, you might do just in general, if you've got friends and family in other parts of the country, just go to prepareforyourcare.org. Now we're going to bring this website up and I'll show it to you. Prepareforyourcare.org is where, and there's another one called caringinfo.org. And you can actually download information off their website. They have all 50 states, the documents for all 50 states available. So you don't have to go state by state, but if you had to go state by state, just go to the state, Ohio, Advanced Care Planning, and you should be, or Advanced Care Directives, and you should be able to bring up their documents on their government site. Does that make sense?
So much. This is great.
And Garrick, you said prepareforyourcare.com. Is that what you said? Oh, there
It's
you go.
.org.
Yeah.
Right
Okay.
here. Yes. And it's really meant to they really have done a great job. It's run by a doc out of California, and they've done a great job as a nonprofit to pull this together. So, and they even go through videos and show you how to fill everything out. So it's very simple. So there's a how to use, welcome, prepare, learn. Sorry, there's videos. So there's that to go to if in fact you're looking for documents from another state. Because every state's different, by the way. Not every state's the same. Go figure. The legislative session, the state legislators are the ones who actually create the laws around these documents, which means that as an example, an out of hospital do not resuscitate is an order that you can create in the state of Texas. And that once you do, you send it off, and you need to get some jewelry, basically a pendant or a necklace, a bracelet that you wear when you're in public. So if someone is to find you unconscious and EMTs come, we'll see the light. Hopefully they'll see, and they will not perform CPR. If you're going into the hospital in the state of Texas, this is important to understand. They've made it much more complex, unfortunately and unnecessarily, where once you're admitted, you have to make your request of a do not resuscitate order in front of the attending physician and 2 witnesses at the time, once you're admitted to the floor, which means that from the time you're admitted to the floor, you're admitted from down in the ER, let's say, up until the time you get to the floor, and up until the time you actually see your hospitalist, which could be hours, you are full code. So that's not acceptable, really. But the legislators were influenced by special interest groups to make it.
Okay,
Pardon?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but is the patient the only one who can request this? And what if the patient is like in so much pain or not thinking clearly? Can somebody else?
Your medical power, well, it depends. If you're found to not have decisional capacity, then your medical power of attorney can speak for you. And you can always, as a patient advocate for a patient if they're kind of in and out of, being able to be conscious. So that's all decisions are made in the moment.
Okay.
There's
What
no
about-
set way of doing it.
What about in the situation like with my mother-in-law, she can make a decision in a moment, but then it'll be a totally different decision because she has dementia and can't remember anything. So
Right. So she doesn't have decisional capacity.
So how do
You have to talk to the doctor about decisional capacity and what it is when it comes to healthcare decisions, whether the doctor would clear her to make her own decisions for her healthcare. And this is, again, why it's important for us to have these plans in place before or at the time of diagnosis. As an example, if you have a diagnosis of dementia, there's actually a specific supplemental that you can add to your living will that specifies what kind of treatments you do and do not want based on the stage of dementia you're in. And they break it down into, mild, moderate, and severe. But I'll give you that link as well. These are dementia directives specifically, and that's something you would add to so that you're clear about what to do. So we don't have this back and forth and putting them in a place where they really don't belong, trying to make decisions about their health care.
And she doesn't believe anything's wrong, and so it makes it we can't.
Yeah.
But,
And that's, of course, that's always that fuzzy line and tragic, difficult, challenging line about how it is, when a caregiver, when is the moment you step up and take the keys away? When's the moment you step up and step into their lives in such a way that they may perceive to be intrusive, and oftentimes do, but nonetheless, it's in their best interest and in the best interest of those around them. And so those are all very difficult times and difficult decisions. So, but these dementia directives, which are now in the chat, these are just an example of how it is that you can manage or how it is that you can look forward and say, here's what I want at this stage. There's 14 different stages, I believe, according to the FAST test of dementia. And that's where I think the conversation earlier about reevaluation is perhaps geared towards. So, and this one, of course, just breaks it down into mild, moderate, and severe, but that's okay. It's in the range and it gives you an idea. So you can be, so this is, and that's all part of, the second, the subset of the second of the 3Ds, which is discuss, and having these discussions with your healthcare professionals about what your wishes are really important. Make sure they're informed. And so when they're informed, then they can be making recommendations that are aligned with what it is that you value most. Again, back to what it is that you value most. So that's the second of the 3Ds. The third is documentation, which we've talked a lot about and shown some examples of, is document, the ideal is that you would have your directed to physician and family or surrogates, which is your living will. Number 2, you'd have your medical power of attorney. Number 3, you'd also tell us whether you want organ or tissue donation. And that's important because we need to know. I'm talking about more than just on your license. So you just supplement that by having that filled out, documents. You can register, you can go into the registry, but you also need to communicate that to your loved ones. And then you want to have your authorization for disposition of cremains, which is, what do I want done with my body? Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be embalmed? Do I want to have, where do I want to be laid to rest? What do I want done with my cremains? Do I want flame cremation? Do I want water cremation? Do I want terramation, which is recomposting, or do I want to, do I want to be shipped to Colorado and burned in a pyre, my body burned on a pyre? So these are all things you have to make decisions around. And that's where we talk about then disposition of your body, which, what do we do with it? And then you have to tell someone, another document is, who's authorized to take care of my body? Who's the person that I'm going to rely upon to make sure my body is cared for? Do I, the other thing is, you might want to donate your body to science. There's a whole big process to go through well in advance in order to do that. So these are all decisions, and these are all documents to back up those decisions, so that we're abundantly clear about what to do and make sure that you're cared for. And then these are the after death decisions I'm talking about, the disposition of cremains and our disposition of body, and also who's going to take care of you.
Garrick, do you know where to find the information for donating your body to science?
Just do whole body donation. You can, I go through it in one of my webinars series here. Let me see. So I typically do a 5-part series on this. They're 90 minutes each, and they're either webinars or they're in person. So let me see here. The next in-depth conversation is about your peace of mind end-of-life plan, how to decide, document, and discuss your final wishes before you go. And that'll take place, or that just took place last week. And then we're going to have a live from 10:30 to 3:30 at Uprising Church in South Austin on the 27th of September. So September 27th, we're going to talk about this from 10:30 to 3:30. Lunch will be provided. It's sponsored by AARP, and it's on the Kitchen Table Conversations website. You can register now. And we'll break it down in 3 Ds and talk in great detail. And you'll receive probably almost 300 pages of handouts. Sorry, it's a lot of information, but it gives you a lot of resources to go back to for each one of the 3 Ds. So all this information we've talked about is in that in the handouts, and we talk about it. And what's interesting about doing this live is that there's so many stories that people share, and we learn from one another, and we use, of course, what I'm sharing as a foundation for not only learning, but setting the tone for, and giving some time for you to do some work. I mean, these are workbooks as well. Included in this, there's 3 or 4 different workbooks, and we'll work through those, and at least initially, and give you some homework to go back and work with, so that you start getting into the mood, as it were, into the space of being able to have this conversation about your own mortality, and starting to understand what it is that you really, really want, and understand all the ins and outs. Lots of questions about CPR. CPR, do I want CPR? Do I not want CPR? Well, you have to take a look at the efficacy of CPR, and age, and bodily condition. If you're 80 years old, your osteoporosis, and you have underlying conditions, you may not want to do that, because CPR is brutal. It's not, it's not like you see on TV. It's not even close to what you see on TV. It is torture. And if you're not cracking ribs, you're not getting it done. And so you've got to heal from that injury. And you may be coming in and out of consciousness as they're doing. The blood flow gets back into your brain. You're waking up. You're in the ER, and all of a sudden, you may be conscious of what they're being brutalized. I mean, that's horrific. So you have to really take a look and say, well, gee, what is my condition? Like me, I might say, it's okay. I have no underlying conditions. I'm in great health, And it's like, yeah, probably, maybe, I'm not sure. But if I had underlying conditions, I had, conditions were easily cracking my bones and whatnot, because the efficacy of that is about 3 to 5%. So it's not what you see in Hollywood. It's not like, well, there you go. I just had CPR. I'm feeling great. Thanks so much. But it's not the way it works. So you've got to really dive in and get educated on this and see what makes the most sense for you. So on the 27th, we'll be doing this conversation in depth in all three categories in a deeper dive, and some exercises that you'll actually be able to, we'll give time for.
I encourage everybody to visit kitchentableconversations.org because it's amazing. They have so much information there, and that's where all the events and dates and registration links are. So I really encourage you, kitchentableconversations with an S.org. It's great. And you get to see Garrick's picture at the bottom to make sure it's the right place.
It really is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of those things that we don't talk about, and we really need to. And we as family caregivers, like I said, we have to make so many big decisions, and this is one of those that isn't often discussed, and we have to kind of guess, and it's
You mean
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
documents?
well, everything in general, making all the decisions, and what you do with the body and all those things. So I was just saying, please go to kitchentableconversations.org. You see all the thank you for putting this up there. I mean, a lot of really good topics that we don't think of those things readily, but they're very, very good topics to think about. Now, Sonia, you wanted to say something.
I did. I wanted to chime in on the importance of your parents or even yourself, having these advanced directives, these paperwork put in place, because the situation is that my mother was diagnosed with dementia last year, and she doesn't have anything put in place. She refuses to give her power of attorney to anyone. And so there are 7 siblings, and no one agrees, or no one wants to have anything to do with her care. So now the state's been called in, because obviously she needs someone in charge of her. She can no longer drive. The doctor says she can't live alone. And she can't even manage her own medications anymore. So, but there's nothing in place that gives anyone the power to take care of her, and she can no longer make those decisions because she can't remember
You have to
who
be guarded.
6 weeks ago.
You're talking about doing some guardianship work?
That's what the state's doing. Yes. But anyway, it's very important. So after she was diagnosed, I had all these forms drawn up and presented to her, and she still refused to sign them. So do it before something happens rather than when you wait for something to happen, because that's when people get scared, is when they feel like that they're forced to, they have to make a decision now. And when they have dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, it's just more confusing for them, and they feel like that you're trying to steal their life.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because it is very, very true.
It has been very stressful on my family.
Yeah. And it's not even with dementia, but it's just, it doesn't have to be a cognitive thing. Oftentimes it's, cancer, or, all kinds of illnesses, chronic conditions where there's decline. And, when you get to the point where it's just way too late, it's just so much harder and much more emotional.
Yes. So when I took care of my stepdad and he went on hospice, he had given me power of attorney that only went into effect when he was deemed incapacitated. He did that 8 years prior. But when he was put on hospice, the doctor filled out the form that says, he can't make his own decisions. And so the last 6 months of his life, I went in and made his funeral arrangements, but I had that authority.
Right. Yeah. And wasn't that better, or didn't it make more sense to do things that way in a rational way rather than going back and forth?
Yes,
or,
but
like,
what I
change your
didn't know
mind?
is that since he wasn't my biological father, that when he passed, I did not have the right to make his funeral arrangements. Only a family member could. And that's a lot of things. If you have a
And you're not considered family?
no, because he and my mother were divorced, but I still considered him my dad. So anyway, he had to sign a legal document in order for me to make his funeral arrangements.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
So
That's
that's
the
another,
that's the authorization for disposition.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
But
A very
a
specific
lot of people
form.
don't know that. They think, oh, well, he's taken care of me all my life and, I've done this or that. But you do not have the legal authority to make funeral arrangements for that person
Yeah.
unless they
Wow.
sign a legal document naming you.
Okay, so I guess like Garrick said, you have to do that early on, and just in order to make those arrangements early on, you need to talk about those things early on, right?
Yeah. And so I asked him, I said, what do you want done? And the jokester he's like, surprise me. Well, at that point, he's going to be gone. So I just went in quietly and made those arrangements. And when the day came when he passed, I just made one phone call and it was so easy.
Yes, yes, thank you.
It's caring, you're giving the permission. It's the last gift that you can give your family
Mhm.
is the gift of peace. When you've gone, you've
Mhm.
made your arrangements. You've
Mhm.
signed your paperwork, you've made your arrangements.
Yes, yes.
And also when your college kids go to college and they're over 18, you
You
have to
do.
get that power of attorney.
That's what I'm
Somebody
working on
has to
with
have
my-
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they have somebody has to be a power of attorney, and it's not necessarily the parents.
Well, yeah, but someone. But the fact is that just because you're the parent, when they're over 18,
You don't have
it
any-
doesn't necessarily mean you get to speak for them or
Mm-mm.
make their decisions.
That's right. You have no access to their medical record.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So, well, these are all great bits of information, like pointing out, and it goes back down to earlier is better than later.
Yes.
It's
Before.
always too soon until it's too late.
Yes, yes, exactly. So thank you. All right, so back to Garrick.
Okay. Well, I think I'm up on my time. I just want to be respectful of your time. So tell me where we are at, Lynn, as far as time is concerned.
Okay, we're around there. Yeah, okay. So if you wanted to add some maybe closing remarks or any other questions or questions
Sure.
from the family caregivers who, comments about the topic today?
Yeah.
And I wanted to say thank you and for joining us, Chantel and Danielle. I know you joined us later, but we did not ignore you, and you were there. So thank you for being here. Did you want to ask anything, any comments or anything?
Should I go ahead and stop recording right now?
No, I just wanted, if it's related to the talk, there might be a good question, but if nobody has anything to add to that, then we can stop the recording. Any comments from anybody? Okay, any, I don't want to say final words, but any last comments, Garrick, that you want to conclude this wonderful talk with?
Well, thank you again for allowing me to be here. I hope that what we shared today was helpful, and encourage you to come to the live event and give a chance to dive deeper into this and to receive some educational materials that you'll be able to help guide you in this process, because it can be really a daunting task to think, well, now I've got to plan the end of my life. My goodness. Well, you plan weddings, you plan to buy a house, you plan to get married. This is one of those things we plan for. And so it takes time. And so getting some of those resources will be helpful. You can also download those same resources off the resource page of kitchentableconversations.org. And remember, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's always too soon until it's too late. So the best time to get started is today.
Thank you for
And,
putting all this together. It's an amazing resource.
Yeah,
I'm
it
just
is, it is.
grateful.
And like I said, check out that website,
yeah,
because it
definitely.
has lots, and attend the webinars. That's why we have Garrick come every year. At least we would squeeze him in more often, but he's a very, very, very busy speaker. So now you can see why. So, all right.
you.
Well, thank you so much, Garrick, for being
thanks,
here.
everyone.
You take
All right.
good care, okay? We'll talk again soon. All right. Thank you.
All right.